What's up guys, welcome to this Docker and Django tutorials for beginners. Moving on in this channel, we'll start leveraging the use of Docker and Docker Compose a lot in our subsequent projects and tutorials. That's the reason why I decided to do a crash course on Docker with Django. And I'm not going to be going too much into theoretical explanation of what Docker is, what container is and all that. I'll leave links to resources where you can read more about them. But briefly, the idea of containers is a way of packaging our applications with all the necessary dependencies and configuration that it needs to run in an isolated environment. So think of it this way. Think of a container as a micro-isolated visual system or computer residing inside your local system that actually contains everything a specific application needs to run. Alright, so all major softwares and packages have their official Docker image. So a Docker image is is a file system, like a blueprint, which contains scripts, configurations, and set of instructions on how to build or create a Docker container. Alright, so why a container is a running instance of an image. So every official software that we use in development have their official Docker container or Docker image, which is hosted on Docker Hub. Just like the way we have GitHub for storing codes and source code, we also have Docker Hub for storing Docker containers. Alright, so if you head to Docker Hub, you can create your own account, sign up and create an account. And if you search, all major softwares have their own official Docker image. If you explore, you can see a lot of official, like Nginx. This is the official Docker image for Nginx. PostgreSQL has its own official image. So all major softwares have their own official image. And the interesting thing is that you can easily, once you have Docker installed, you can easily put this image of these softwares into your own Docker Compose file, and that's it. You can set it up and start working with it. You don't have to install them manually on your computer. That's the best thing about Docker. So one of the major problems that Docker has helped to eliminate in the life of a developer is the idea of having compatibility issues. Imagine working as a team where developer A is working with a Windows system and developer B is working with a Mac system. And maybe the application you are building, everything works fine in the Mac system, and you send that same code to the other developer that is working in the Windows system, and the code refuses to work or something breaks in the code because of some kind of configurations and all that. I remember there was a time I was trying to work with Redis on my Windows system. I was having issues setting Redis up in Windows. So those are the complexities that Docker helps us to solve, because once you build your own Docker image, your Docker container, you can easily share it with your team and you can easily deploy it to the cloud. So once you share it with your team puts that Docker container into their own system. Once they have Docker installs, they don't need to install those softwares manually in their system. They don't need to install maybe Postgres or any other kind of software that application is using. They don't need to install it manually. They just put the Docker container into their own system, and that's it. It runs fine, it runs the same way it runs on my system. Those are the things that Docker helps us to eliminate. And it makes deployment very fast because you can push your Docker container to the cloud easily, and everything will work fine just the way it worked in your system, because all the dependencies and packages that the application need are actually in your Docker Compose file. Alright, so let's see how we can set Django and Docker up. And also you need to have Docker installed in your own system. So if you don't have it installed, you just go to the official Docker documentation and follow the instructions. As far as your system meets the requirements, I think you must have an 8 gig RAM and at least 64 bits if you're using Windows. So just check the system requirement. Once it meets the system requirement, it's a straightforward installation process. Alright, so I will leave links to some documentation that will help you in the installation of Docker. Alright, so once you have Docker installed, you have the CLI working, and you also have the Docker desktop working. Alright, so let me quickly spin up my Docker desktop so you see Docker desktop. Alright, so this is Docker desktop starting because I have Docker already installed in my system. That's why I'm saying this. So once you can able to start your own Docker desktop and you see this part of it all green, it means that your Docker is set up correctly. But if here is showing maybe red or something, probably something is missing up. But right now, there's no running container in my Docker desktop. So we'll see by the time we set up our own Django container, we'll see the container running here locally on our own Docker desktop. So that's that. So let's head over to our empty folder. First of all, we'll just spin up a blank Django application. Then before we will now build a Docker image of that Django application. All right. So first we'll create a virtual environment. Once we have our virtual environment set up and we have activated it, we need to install Django. And so once our Django finishes installing, let's quickly create a Django project. All right, so let's open this let's open in our code editor, the editor of your choice. Let's create our requirement.txt file. Well, that's a very important file for a Docker file or Docker container. So we say pip freeze requirement.txt. So that will create a requirements file for us. So you can see our requirements file. Alright, so that's that. So let's just quickly create a very simple Django app to just test our app. The app to install that, and then we can start our server. Alright, so that's our project is running. So let's quickly open this in. Alright, you can see our Django is fully installed and is working fine. So that's good. So up next, we'll see how we can actually build a Docker image of this Django project. Alright. So now we have our basic Django running already on our local host. Now let's set up a Django, a Dockerfile to actually build a container for our own application. This is this Django application. So in our base directory here, where we have a manage of file, we just create a Dockerfile called Dockerfile. So this is the file that we're going to use to build our own Docker image of our application. Alright, so this Docker image that we want to build, we want to base it on a particular operating system. Alright, I want to base it on a Linux operating system that has Python installed in it. So we're going to be using the Slim Buster. There are a lot of them here. You can check the different image from Docker Hub. These are Linux-based images. We have Ubuntu, we have Alpine. These are Linux-based image. We have Redis, is a Linux-based image. You can check them out, but we want a Linux-based image that has Python installed for our operating system. That is the operating system inside our own Docker image. So there are some set of commands that we use in a Docker file. First is from to signify the base image. You can see it's giving us hints of to specify a base image, and the base image we want to specify is Python. Python will specify a version for the Python. Let's choose 3.8. You can choose any other version. I want to use the Slim Buster. We can set the work directory. This is work directory inside our Docker image. And the doc directory we can set to be app. Sorry, this should be work directory, not work. So we need to copy everything from our own requirement.txt here into another requirement.txt inside our Docker image, the one in our local computer, to the one inside our own Docker image. So once we have that, we want to create a run command. This is used to run some commands. So what we want to run is we want to install the requirement by saying pip3 install. That's the requirement.txt inside is our own Docker image. So next, we want to copy our project from our local computer into this Docker image. So we use the copy command one more time. This time, we want to copy everything from dot, which is our current directory here. We want to copy it into, you can see it's specifying, giving us hints of app, but we don't want to use this app. We want to copy everything into the base, into dot, which signifies the base directory as a root directory inside our Docker image. So the root directory is also the app directory, so we are specifying it into this. Or you want to write the commands that we need to run in our Docker image. The commands we need to run, you can see it's giving us hint. It says set the default executable and parameters for this executing container. So the command that we need to run inside this container is so we want to run python2 image.py run server. This is actually run our server, that is our Django application server inside the Docker image in the Docker container. Now, for us to be able to access the Django application inside this Docker container that we want to build, we need to specify our port here as 0.0.0.08000. This will give us access to the Django application that will be set up in the Django container, that is in the Docker container. Alright, this is the basic barest and minimum of our Django, of our Docker image. There are other things that you can add to it. For now, this is just for the basis. Alright, so when we start working with Docker Compose, we'll see how we can add other things to it. So you can also set labels also. If you want to set a label, you can set a label. So label takes a key value pair. You can see label key value. The name of the metadata sets metadata to an image. So if you want to set a metadata for an image, you can set a metadata of name. Alright, so that's our label. So these are the basics, so we can save this. So if we check our Docker desktop, if you go to image Docker computer, these are the images that I've used in previous jobs and all that. But the one we're going to create now, once we build that image, this image that we just created, we'll give it a name. When we are building the image, you see the images will appear here with the name that we assign to it. Now, before we build our Docker image, first of all, there may be some files or folder that we don't want to be part of our image when we build it, like this virtual environment. We don't want to be part of our file. So there's what we call docker.get.docker-ignore. Just like we have get-ignore, we have docker-ignore. These are files. This is a file that we use to specify other files that Docker will not actually build. That's the file, no extension, just that. So that's that. So we'll specify the files that should not be built into our container. So once we do that, we can run our container now by heading to our terminal. In the base directory where we have our Dockerfile and manage.py and everything, we run the Docker image a tag, which is the tag name that we can use to identify our image. You can call it Docker and Django demo. Alright, that's the name we want to call our image. So Docker build dash tag, the name of the image. Run this command now. It will build up our image. Alright, we are getting some kind of error. It says Docker build require exactly one argument. Oh, I got the error. Why we have that error? It's supposed to be Docker build dash the tag, which you want to call Django demo. Then we need to specify the location where we want to build. It should be in our current directory, which is dot. So that's the current directory that we want to build our Docker image. You can see it's building up our image. This will take a few seconds so smoothly. So once the build is complete, we can see our Docker image and our Docker desktop. Alright, so our image has finished building. So let's head over to our Docker hub. If we check our image, not container, if we check our image, we should see the Django demo. Alright, you can see the Django demo image that was just created, and you can see less than a minute ago. So that means our Django demo image was built successfully. So we have our image now. So let's run this image. So the process of running this image is actually what refers to as a container. So let's run this image into a container on our Docker image. So for us to do that, we use the command docker run. And this time we want to publish We just want to run the container. I want to also publish it by using the flag -- publish. I want to publish it into port 8000. So this port 8000 is a port on our own system. So listen to a port 8000 on the container. All right. So that we're able to access our Docker container from our browser. All right. So we're actually running the Docker image. We are publishing the port 8000, which is the port of the image, to our own port 8000. And we're specifying the name of the image that we want to run, which is the Docker image, which is we just called Django demo. All right. So if we run this to our Docker desktop, we shall now see. You can see that it's saying the Django demo is in use. So if we check our container, we can see we have one running container which is with the name of Django demo. All right, so we'll be able to run our first container. Let's see if we can access our Django website one more time. You can see our application is still running on port 8000 with our host, even when we didn't start our server manually. You can see this time Django is the one running our Docker is the one running our Django application. All right, so we've been able to run our Django application from Docker. These are a very basic example. So congratulations for that. So we'll proceed from here. We'll see how we can leverage Docker Compose when we are working with multiple containers. Remember, when you are building your Django application, there's definitely going to be need for you to actually maybe install some other applications like Redis, or maybe use Postgres, or use Celery and all that. So we'll see how we can build multiple containers. Maybe welcome back. Okay, the Docker file that we just created is actually for a single service. It's only allowing a single service, which is our Django project, to run. All right, so the concept of Docker Compose allows us to run multiple services together using a Docker Compose. So take note. Now, it does not necessarily mean that when we want to maybe Dockerize our Django application, we need to first of all set up the application first. You don't really need to set up the application first. If you have the application and you want to Dockerize the application, it is fine. But if you want to just spin up a Django application directly from your Docker image, you can also do that as well. So we are going to see how we're going to refactor this and see how we can use Docker Compose to run our container and maybe run any other services that we want to run along with our container. For example, as we are building our Django projects, we want to use a Postgres database. All right, so we can spin up a Postgres service, which by using maybe an existing Postgres container on Docker Hub, and maybe we want to use Redis and any other service like Nginx. We can also spin those up also, and put everything on Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is like a file that combines multiple services to run a particular application. So we'll see how we can refactor this to use Docker Compose. To refactor this Docker file, which is singly for our own Django application, it's first of all we remove this command because we're not going to be running this single Docker file anymore. So Docker Compose is going to be running both our Docker image and maybe any other Docker container that we want to run along with our image. So the command will be in Docker Compose, and also there are two other environment variables that we need to set here. So in a Docker file, there's what we know as the env. You can see it's giving us an hint. Here the ends we need to what we know as Python buffer. All right, so this we want to set the value to 1. What this actually means is that any kind of error output and any kind of log output should be sent to the terminal. All right, so that's the first one we want to, and you can put equal, so you can just set it to 1 like this. Then the second variable is here we want to set Python.write bytecode. I want to set this to 1 also. So what this actually means is that the Python should not write first to PYC. All right, so these two we set here. I think we should bring this above. All of these are single Django Docker image. So what we need to do in our base directory, we need to create a docker-compose YAML file. Alright, now take note, it's not necessarily mean that the name must be dockercompose.yaml file, but the important thing is that it should be a YAML file. Alright, so you can use any name with a YAML file. So that's it. So here we are going to specify first of all the version. You can see it's giving us a hint, and here we can use maybe version, I think 3.8. So we have our version. Next, we need to specify our services. Alright, you can see it's giving us a hint, services, and the first services we want to specify is our web service, which is this our own Django service. Alright, that has this image, which is this Dockerfile image. Alright, so we just give it a name, we call it a name of web. That's the name we want to call the service. And this web service, we need to specify the build directory. We need to specify the build. There's a part where the Dockerfile for this service is, and here we're going to specify two things. First of all, under build, we are going to specify the context, and we're going to specify this context to the current directory, and also we're going to specify the Dockerfile because it's in the root directory. Alright, so we access the Dockerfile, which is this Dockerfile. Alright. Then container name also, we can specify a name for our container. We can call it, we can specify one as volume. Volume, it's here the volume we want to set is actually the work directory. What volume means is that where is it going to store the application files in. So we want the application files and other files relating to the application to be stored in the application directory, which is this work directory that was specified here. So if we want the volume to be in any other directory, we can specify that there. Then next we need to specify the port by using the ports. And here we want to map the ports of 8000. Then finally we can bring in our command. Here we have the command. Alright, so here we can specify that command we use to run our Django. But the more cleaner way is to create a start script. Alright, so let's see if we can do that now. We create a start script, and here we're going to call the script. Alright, so we want it to run that script for the commands. So in here, we can just create a script, call it start, in our base directory here. And in here, we need to bring in the script. So we need to copy, we're saying copy first /start to /start. Alright, so we are copying from the start in our own local directory to our own start in our own Docker container. Alright, so that's that. So if we want to do another thing, we need to bring in two other commands. Two commands to actually run this start script. We paste that here. We can save this, and here we have the start script as the command. We save this, but we need to create this script. It's a bash script. So I'll just grab the script, the Django script. What we basically want to run here is probably the run server and maybe the run migration script. So the reason why we are actually using the start script is because probably we want to run more than one command, maybe like the start server and the collect static and the run migration script. We set these three values, and we want to write the script, which is, so that's it for the start script. Sorry, this should be bash. The bash script. Alright, so I'm not a Linux guy, so let me just bring this one in. So this will be our start script that is going to be run in this command. Alright, so that's for that. So we have that script here, and we put the path here, and in our Docker file, we'll make sure we copy the script from our own system to the script inside the Docker image, and we run the script. All right. I think this should be after we've copied our project in. Right. All right. So these are basic Django compose. There are other commands that you can assign to it. Once we have our Docker compose set up for our own Django Docker image, now we'll set up that of Postgres, but let's first test if we can still run our Docker image. Let's double check everything and see if we are not making any type of errors. All right, so let's check our script one more time and see. Oh, we have a typo here. This should be no input. All right, then we can save this. So once we have that, we can run our Docker compose now. So let's head to our terminal and clear the terminal, and we just run Docker compose, then up -- build, because we want to run the Docker compose and wants to build the container also. Once we do that, we can see our build is running. You can see it's running. Our start script is running. Okay, our container was created. You can see the container says, all right, he ran the migration, which was the command that we gave him. Run the migration and he run the server. Cool, everything is working fine. So if we head back to our browser, we should still get our application. Fine, our application is still running fine. Good. So let's see how we can add Postgres, because Docker Compose gives us the ability to run multiple services. So we create the Postgres service right now and see how we can run both containers together. We want to add a Postgres image. All right. Normally, if we want to use Postgres in our Django application, we have to first of all download Postgres into our own local system and make sure we install it. But in the case of Docker Compose, we don't necessarily need to have Postgres installed in our computer. Even when you don't have Postgres installed in our computer, we can use a Postgres official image from Docker Hub to set up Postgres in our application, and it will be up and running. So if you head over to Docker Hub and you search for Postgres, you see the official Postgres and Docker image. All right, so you can see you can use Docker pull to get it from this repository, but I'll show you how you can pull this image down into our own project and use it even without having Postgres installed in our system. In the compose file, we just create a new service. You can name your service any name you want. So I'm going to call this DB. So make sure it's the same line as the web service. So next we need to specify the image. In this case, we want to use the Postgres image. We want to set up volume. All right. So, like we said earlier, we want to set up volume. We want to be able to map the data in this any data we're going to create in this database to our local project, so that anytime we close this application, we close this image, when we come back again, we're able to retrieve the data in this running container and Postgres and running container. So what we're going to do, we're going to map doing here, we are mapping the data that's going to be created in this Postgres and running container to a folder in our own local project directory. This will be done automatically for us. We don't need to create this folder manually. So also we need to set environment variable. So we'll set the environment. Like you see, the name of the environment. First, we need to be in cap, and I'll also show you how to use an environment variable file. All right, so when we have a .env file, but first of all, let's just get an image. So let's see Postgres DB. The value will just be Postgres. All right, so these are the basic environment variable that we need to bring into this container. So also we want to give the container a name. So we give it a container name. All right, this will be our container name. So these are the basic setup. So another thing, before we can work with Postgres, we need to add the dependency for Postgres into our own requirement the TS2 file. So we have we add this here. And lastly, we need to edit our Dockerfile for Django projects. We need to add the cyclepg dependencies and command. So somewhere here we just add this piece of code. Alright, so this is just some kind of Linux command to update and install some cyclepg dependencies. Alright, so just copy it like this and paste it in your own. Alright, so that's the change we need to make here. To finally connect our Django projects to this database, we need to run, first of all, we need to, in the service container, we need to put the depends on feature we want it to depend on the database, alright, which is the DB service. So this will make our web service to depend on the database service. Alright, so once we save that, then we need to head over to our project settings and put the configuration for the Postgres database in our settings file. Postgres, we need change the name to this Postgres name, the username Postgres, the password Postgres, while the host, which is our service DB, this service here. Then the port, which is the default Postgres port. So once we have this set up, we are good to go. So let's build our container one more time. So we head back to our terminal. In here, we just clear this terminal and we run Docker compose up, but this we want to run it in a detached mode. Then we need to build the image again. Alright, so before I actually run this command, let's quickly double check and make sure everything is in order. Alright, so it's just about pulling a Docker image from the Docker hub. That's why our images have started already. Our containers are running. So if you head to your Docker desktop and you head over to images, you can see the image that is running. Our Postgres is running. Our YouTube project web is running. Right. If we go to containers, you can see we have 2 containers running our YouTube project. If we check this, you can see the Postgres is running. And for some reason, the web service is not running. So let's quickly check and see why it's not running. Because we are running it in detached mode, so we can check by saying docker compose logs Alright, this will show us all the logs that we have. So if there's an issue, we will see the issues that may occur. So let's quickly check and see what the issue is. Then we are having database connection issues. Whoa. So this is how you debug your container. You can check logs and see what's happening in your containers. Alright, let me quickly debug and find out what the issue may be. It's working, but I just made some few changes and it is working fine. The change I made was the dependency for the cyclepg. I changed it to this. Alright, so I removed the other 2 lines for get test and netcats. All these ones I removed that. So just leave these. These are majorly the essential ones that we really need for cyclepg, the binary to work. So once we have this, and secondly, I corrected in our volume, we're having the volume part was /data/db followed by the colon. Alright, so there was slash here before, so I remove the slash and save that. So I run the container again and it's working fine. So those are the 2 changes that I made for it to work fine, but I don't really know if they are the cause of the database connection failure. But now once you do those changes and you run your Docker Compose up dash build, you see your container running fine. So if we head back to our browser and access our local host one more time, alright, you can see how our Django and welcome template is loading fine. So that means our both Postgres containers are running. So if you check, you can see Postgres is running and the Django web service is running. So our container are running. Alright, one last thing. Let's quickly make some few changes to our code and see if those changes will actually be reflected in our running container without having to start the container again. So that I'll just quickly do that. So I already have this template set to our base directory. So in our view, we just create a simple view. We create a simple index view, should be in main index.html. So we create the index.html in our templates folder. We just put a simple welcome to development with Docker. So we have this. Then in URL, just go to the project URL. We just quickly add that to it. So first we need to import the index view. Then once we import it, we need to add it to paths. Then we'll add it to paths also to the index path. So once we save this and we save the view. Alright, so we have the view and the URL set up. So let's go back and refresh without having to start our container. So if you refresh, you can see we have welcome to development with Docker. So we didn't have to restart the container for us to see the changes. That's the work of Volu in our Docker Compose. Alright guys, see you guys in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. We'll see more of Docker in subsequent tutorials. Alright guys.